Joining us in today's segment is Scott Thomas, better known in these parts as Scooter's Record, and thanks for talking with us today.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
You have Scooter's Records on University Boulevard, and you've only been open a couple of years, but already it's sort of an iconic place. And I remember we talked about this before you opened it, about what you wanted to do.
I actually got some records from you.
That's right, you did get some old school records from me, but let's take folks back to the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey. So let's talk about growing up and how you got to Starkville.
Well, I was born in Jackson. My grandparents, my parents lived in Hattiesburg, and I had an aunt that ran a record store in Hattiesburg whenever I was little. And
did you go there when you were a kid?
I'm sorry?
Did you get to go there when you were a kid and look around?
Yeah, a little bit. Mostly, I got that experience from like the stuff that she would bring back to my grandparents' house, and she had like a woman cave, for lack of a better term, that had like her record player and all the, yeah. And so every time we'd go over there, I'd sit in her room and like look at all the records and that kind of thing.
Now, was her taste in music the same as your parents? How did they feel
absolutely,
about her?
Absolutely not. No. And I didn't get any like flack or pushback on like the kind of music that she was into and that I got into. It's like early on. My first record was that I got from her was Captain Fantastic and Brown Dirt Cowboy, the Elton John record. Right. Which was, that totally sucked me in because, first of all, it's a great record, but you can sit for hours and look at the album cover.
Right.
And so, this was around 10 years old, I guess, because that album came out in '75. And, so I, like every time like somebody gifted me something, I'd always ask for records at the time, and every time there were garage sales or whatever, like in the neighborhood, like if there was records for sale, those were my first records that I bought.
Okay, so did you start collecting them as a kid?
I started collecting them as a kid. I've been at it, for however many years I've been alive, minus about 5.
All right. So, were you an audiophile as well, or was the music more important?
I think that they kind of go hand in hand a little bit. After you start, obviously when you're a kid, you can't buy all this stuff. And, I was using my parents' console stereo to listen to records, and we had like a little portable record player that I'd listen to. Over the years I've amassed quite a nice stereo collection.
How broad is that range? Because I know you're like me. We were sort of in the same vein, that classic rock, Zeppelin. I was sort of a prog rocker. Yeah. I loved ELP and Yes. And you talked earlier about the album covers. That was one of the great things about listening to Yes, was that they really were a good example of the artist incorporating or painting a real visual picture of the music, particularly with Yes.
Right.
And I think
Roger Dean, I think.
Yeah, Roger Dean.
Yes,
and I think people really miss that these days because that really was part of the listening experience.
To me, the thing with vinyl and with records and LPs is that you do have to pay attention. You get the record, you have to take it out, take it out of the sleeve and put it on, make sure that the record's clean and all that kind of stuff. Into side one, you have to flip it over, and while you're doing all this, you're looking at the liner notes and looking at the artwork and all that, and it's something that you can't, with CDs or cassettes or especially with downloads, that's not the kind of thing that you can. It's not as participatory, if that's the word.
It reminds me when you were a kid that where you had eat your cereal, you had to read the box, the cereal box, right? You just spend all that time reading the back of the cereal box, and sometimes there'd be something on the inside, and you get to check it out. And it really was the same with music. The artwork was a part of the experience, and that started to go. Obviously in 8-tracks and cassettes and CDs, and now it's. It'd almost be a lost art, except of the resurgence of the interest in
There's
records?
been a big resurgence in about the last 15 years. Pretty much got started with Record Store Day. It was a lot of independent record stores got together and was trying to figure out, how can we, start getting people back interested in records again. Because in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, when CDs came in, it practically killed the whole vinyl thing. Vinyl was still like an underground thing, and you could still, if you were looking hard enough, you could find them. So they started doing this as an annual event where artists would put out like special editions of vinyl,
right.
or basically making records started out and has always been sort of like a collector's niche, and so they were trying to appeal to the collector in people.
Right.
And so that kind of got the ball rolling on the resurgence kind of thing. And then there were like a lot of artists, like for instance, like Jack White and some people like that, like really embraced that and put out like exclusive editions of their records and started, pressing more of their stuff on vinyl.
And kids started
that
buying
kind of
it.
thing.
I mean, younger people started buying them.
Big time. And, I could attribute that to a lot of things. I think that a lot of the kids coming out now, coming up today, their parents, they're still around the records that their parents had. And, there's just nothing like, the picking up the album
Sure.
and all that. And I fully think that one of the things about the vinyl experience and why it's so appealing to people is that, you got to work for it a little bit, and I think you appreciate more anything that you have to work for.
Right.
And
Yeah, that's a good point.
instead of being spoon fed, being able to like press a button and like pick out any song that you want to.
There's sort of the ritual of taking it out,
Absolutely.
cleaning it, and listening to it. All right, I want to start. Go back again and bring you up to the part of your journey where you start a record store, because you're a musician, so you've always been around music and playing music, but that's not what you did as a career.
No. Actually, whenever I came to Starkville, went to Mississippi State, and whenever I got out and trying to figure out what I was going to do, the record store thing has always been something that I wanted to. Well, this was, in the early 90s, and records had pretty much gone away. And I just never really, I never bonded with CDs. And I was playing in bands at the time, and I ended up getting a job working for the city of Starkville, and that turned into a career. And I'm very thankful for that career. I spent many years with the city of Starkville. Was fortunate enough to be able to stay there long enough to retire from the city of Starkville, knowing that something had to come after that.
Right.
And so about 5 or 6 years ago, it's been more than that now, about 10 years ago, I saw the light at the end of the tunnel with the city, and I knew when I was going to be done doing that, and the record thing was coming back, and I was like, well, Bebop Records was the record store in Starkville for years and years and years. And they had closed like a few years back. There was no record store in Starkville.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started kind of doing some research, and all the other SEC schools, they had record stores. And I was like, well, I couldn't figure out why people smarter than me hadn't done it already. But it's the kind of business that you got to love it. And that's definitely,
Right.
That it's a passion to me. I figured if I could just get, the knowledge is there. I just didn't know how to run a business.
Well, so there's two parts to that. One is even if you know how to run a business, in this particular case with music and records, you've got to know what people are buying. You've got to have an ear for the new stuff that they'll buy, and you have to have the history of the old stuff to know, what classic stuff is really going to have the longevity to keep selling, right?
Absolutely.
So you brought that to the table, because I'm sure you're still listening to new stuff, and you never gave up on the old classic rock stuff.
Right. And you know, and it's always a learning process too. You know, I've been very enlightened being in a college town, and you know, having the kids, you know, come in and, you know, finding out what their tastes are and that kind of thing, and exploring that, because, you know, my philosophy is that, you know, I will definitely give my opinions on what I like and what I think is good. And if somebody asks, you know, a general question about music, I'll point them in a direction. But, you know, if I just kept records in there that was just my taste, I wouldn't sell very many of them.
Well, so you had to get the business side. Was that difficult to get the understanding of having to take care of the taxes, the bookkeeping, the ordering, keeping the store up? I see you got merch.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Merchandise.
And that started with getting the logo done.
Okay, and
Martin Rendon helped me out with that. Whenever I started the process, I took a couple of seminars with Chip Templeton.
Small Business Development Center here on campus?
And, you know, that was like developing the game plan, the business plan, and that kind of thing. And did a lot of like researching online, you know, for that kind of thing. Actually, Danny Holt, who had one of his classes,
professor in the College of Business.
They kind of, whenever I started, you know, getting in the mud with this, one of his classes, you know, did some statistics and that kind of thing for me. They didn't really tell me a whole lot that I didn't already know about the record business, but they did help in terms of, like, for instance, you know, these are students, and I really wanted to get that perspective because I was going to be in a college town. And they said, you got to be on Instagram. Well, I never had Instagram. And Instagram has turned into one of the best avenues for social media for the record thing, you know, way better than YouTube or excuse me, not YouTube, Facebook or Twitter or something like that.
Because that's where the kids are. That's where young folks are right now.
Yeah, and it's more of a visual thing too.
So you had to get social media savvy. You sort of had to work on a business plan.
Yep. I did start out with, you know, I had accumulated over the years a ton of records. And whenever I knew that this was the avenue that I was going to go down, then I started, you know, going to other collectors and buying up stuff, because I had to start with some stock. And breaking into the new records, you know, finding out how to deal with their wholesalers, and it's kind of a closed society, so it was like kind of hard to break into that and figure that out. But the way that I got started basically was I started with pop-up, little pop-up things, which, you know, like at the time there was like a little organization going around town called the Greater Good Collective, and they started having Sunday Fun Days on University Drive. And so I started setting up shop there, you know, like on once a month on Sundays, I'd take a bunch of bins out there and sell records. The first time I did that was at the Old Main Festival. That actually was the first time that I took some albums out to try and sell. And I had no idea how that was going to go. And by the end of the day, you know, half the people that I saw were carrying around bags that had records in them. So that gave me the confidence that you know, maybe this is going to work. The Sunday Fun Day things, that you know, doing a summer of that, you know, that gave me more confidence that was going to work.
So
as well as capital.
As well as what?
Capital.
Well, how many years now has the store been open?
I opened up November 15th of 17, so it's been a little over 3 years now.
All right, so talk to me a little bit about what folks are buying. Any surprises to you? What folks are coming in?
Well, I tell you, the best-selling record in the store is, and has been since I opened, that I have to keep in stock, is Fleetwood Mac Rumors. I have sold, I mean, to everybody.
Right. Well, that crosses a lot of different,
absolutely,
particularly
absolutely.
gender-wise. I mean, guys and girls like
Guys
it.
and girls like it. It's a fantastic sounding record. You know, the cream rises to the crop. You know, the cream rises to the top. Good records that have been made through the years. You know, people are going to keep buying Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd. You know, that kind of classic rock stuff that everybody knows. It's still, you know, you know, older people, people my age, your age, and the young people, they still, you know, they still buy all that. Now, when I opened up the store, one of the first big artists that at the time I didn't know anything about, one of the first big sellers was that Childish Gambino record. I think it's called Waking My Love. And so I started figuring out, you know, and looking at trade magazines and that kind of thing, you know, what people were selling, what, you know, what people were asking for. And just started, you know, a lot of it is you know, throwing a dart, taking a shot,
Sure.
and getting some stuff in there. But you know, things like that, like Billie Eilish. Good grief! When Billie Eilish, when her new record came out, it was like, wow, you know, it just sounded like hotcakes. On the other side of things, you know, Sturgill Simpson or Tyler Childers, Chris Stapleton, you know, that kind of thing is a big seller. On the other side of things, like Mac Miller and Kanye West, you know, sell a lot of that kind of stuff to all kinds of people.
So, looking back at how things have progressed, did you ever really think you were going to be an entrepreneur and have a record shop that, again, has sort of become an icon in a college town on University Boulevard?
Well, I'll tell you, whenever I was doing the business plan and all that, you know, I knew that I was made for it. You know, I didn't know if Starkville was going to, like I said, it'd been 10, 15 years since there had been a record store, and I figured there was a reason for that. But I think really just nobody like took that mantle up and wanted to do it.
Right.
But I think it did take somebody that was like really passionate. And you know, there's not a whole lot of people like me, you know, that have like a big record collection that you know, and that. You know,
and
I came to a time in my life that I needed a change in my life,
right.
and it was something that I knew that I could do if I could get the business aspect of it figured out, which in the grand scheme of things was not that hard. It really wasn't. I feel like I'm kind of a smart guy, and I've always taken care of my finances and, you know, that kind of thing. So it's really, you know, you got to stay on top of inventory and paying your taxes and, you know, all that kind of thing. But it's really, in these days, you know, if you're running a business, like the point of sale systems that people have now, you know, do so much for you.
Right.
And give you statistics and, you know, that kind of thing that you can use if you pay attention. So that's that. All of those kind of things, you know, I think it's probably a little bit easier to start from scratch, kind of like I did now, than it might have been 30 years ago.
Well, congratulations on your success. You know, it's one thing to think it's something you want to do and to, yeah, I got a bunch of records, but to actually have the discipline and the drive to go out and get smart about what it takes to run a business and follow through and open up a shop that literally, when you say Scooter's Records, I'm like, oh yeah. So congratulations.
Well, you know what? I appreciate that. One of the goals that I had all along. Well, one of the goals that I had after it got going, and I knew that it was going to stick. Was, you know, a few years down the road, I would love for Scooter's Records to be, you know, when people talk about backstage music or the Little Dewey or something like that, you know.
Right.
Whenever I got done with the city, you know, it was a toss-up whether or not I was like just going to get in a camper and travel for a while or move someplace else and try something different. But one of the things that I've always preached in Starkville is like we need to keep people here, like the smart people, the talented people, the cool people in Starkville, And so I figured I needed to put my money where my mouth was and do that.
Well, congratulations and thank you, because it really
appreciate
has
it. Thanks for having me.
added some flavor to this college town.
I appreciate it.
And thanks for your time today. We
No problem
appreciate
at
it.
all. Thanks for having me.